Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Keefe, and I'm the Center for Ethics Student Forum president. And I'm happy to welcome all of you today to a presentation by Professor Predrag Cicovacki of the College of the Holy Cross about the meaning of life and his newest book, The Meaning of Life, A Quick Immersion, forthcoming with Tibidabo Publishing. Before we begin, I'll say a little bit about this event's sponsors and Professor Cicovacki himself. So today's event is sponsored by the students of the Center for Ethics Student Forum and the John Beer Blumenfeld Center for Ethics. This event is part of a spring 2021 speaker series, Ethical Dialogues Across the Virtual University, Multidisciplinary Perspectives. Please see ethics.gsu.edu for details about upcoming events. Before beginning our session, our next talk after today's is by Professor Elizabeth Brake of Rice University. She speaks Thursday, April 1st from 3 until 4:15 p.m. on the wrong of stalking. See ethics.gsu.edu for registration details. Predrag Cicovacki is a professor of philosophy at the College of the Holy Cross, where he has been teaching since 1991. He has also served as a visiting professor in Germany, Russia, Luxembourg, Serbia, France, and India. In the fall to winter of 2012 to 2013, Professor Cicovacki was a senior Fulbright Nehru Fellow at the Malavia Center for Peace Research at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, India. His areas of specialization are problems of good and evil, violence and nonviolence, philosophy of war and peace, and ethics. And his teaching and research is often focused on the works of Kant, Hartmann, Schweitzer, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and Gandhi. Over the course of his career, Professor Cicovacki has published over 100 essays in academic venues. These essays have been published in or translated into English, Serbian, German, Russian, Slovenian, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese. Professor Cicovacki has also authored and edited 18 books, the latest of which are The Luminosity of Love and Gandhi's Footprints. I'm very happy to welcome Professor Cicovacki today to give this presentation. And now I'll hand the floor over to you, Professor Cicovacki.
Thank you, Austin. It's a pleasure to do it, despite the fact that this is a little bit strange not to be able to see the audience, but it is what it is. I will begin by calling your attention to one very old, persistent, and intuitively appealing idea, namely that life should be understood as a kind of a journey. Think about it for a second. Life is a journey. I will say more about it in the course of my presentation, but for now I want to take you for a little journey back in time. And I want to take you back to July 20th, 1969. Maybe that date does not mean much to you, but that was one of the most important dates in my life when I was growing up. And not just for me, on that date, if you can imagine that around 650 million people were glued to their television sets. To see what? To see for the first time in human history, a human being step on the surface of the moon. It was Neil Armstrong who was joined 20 minutes later with Edwin Buzz Aldrin, who on July 20th, 1969, walked on the surface of the moon. As I mentioned, 650 people were watching on a picture that we would today find unacceptable. You could barely see anything, which may be one of the reasons why my grandma was claiming that this was all fake. They are doing it somewhere in New Mexico desert or, but you know, grandmas, you cannot take them all seriously. People believe that that's really happened. The thing that's so important about it was that many anthropologists and psychologists and philosophers and mythologists believe that the oldest dream of human beings is to fly, to be like birds, to elevate from the surface of the earth and see things from birds' point of view. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. And I just want to tell you how monumental that event was at the time, and why it attracted such a wide audience across the world. Obviously, most of you would know that there was that was part of the Cold War's race for more prestige between Russia and the United States, between the Eastern Communist bloc and the Western capitalist bloc. And that for a while, Russia was leading in that race. It launched Sputnik, the first satellite to go around the Earth, and Russia even managed to send the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. But this happened only 8 years before people landed on the moon. Yuri Gagarin flew around the Earth on April 12, 1961. And Yuri Gagarin was the fourth Russian attempt to send a person out in space. 3 other rockets that were sent before Yuri Gagarin exploded, and we normally don't even know the names of those people. The NASA program, the US program, was also beset with all kinds of troubles and tragedies. Some of you may have seen Apollo 13 movie that ended up with a happy ending, but not many of these technical failures and troubles and unpredictables ended up being so happy ones. Let me mention to you that when Neil Armstrong stepped on the surface of the moon, and when he said a sentence that I believe is still known to virtually every person on this planet, or I hope at least in this country, he said, "This is one small step for a man, but one large leap for humanity." And notice that Armstrong said that during the Cold War, that this is one great leap for humanity, for all of humanity. Even though obviously the astronauts planted the US flag on the moon, but they were still thinking about those global terms, that they are doing something to advance the work of the humanity. We know the names of Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and even of Michael Collins, who didn't step on the moon, but who was flying around the moon to wait for the other two to finish their work. I should mention to you that in order to be able to fly that mission successfully, that included or demanded the work of about 400,000 engineers, scientists, and technicians. About 400,000 people were needed to make something like that possible. We know these two names, as I mentioned. We virtually don't know the names of almost anybody else who was in one way or another involved in that mission. That event was something really extraordinary. And I want to use this event to try to tell you a little bit about my forthcoming book and some of the ways in which I'm thinking about it and about trying to understand the meaning of life. And this topic of the meaning of life is in the heart of every human being, but especially of every student of philosophy. I assume that most people in the audience, if not all of them, are of the age of 18 and 19 and 20. And I think if you are studying philosophy at that time, you're dreaming to be able to say something meaningful about the meaning of life once in your life and to get a better grasp of what that involves. In my book on the meaning of life, as several of you noted in the comments that I got through Austin Keefe, I did not tie the meaning of life to happiness as most of you expected. Let me just say briefly why I didn't, and I hope to come back to it, or in question and period, we can come back to it. In philosophy, and in any other field of intellectual endeavor, it is not a good idea to try to explain one confusing and vague concept like the meaning of life by means of another vague and confusing concept like happiness. It doesn't take you anywhere. One confusion does not explain another confusion, and we are as confused about what happiness is as we are about the meaning of life. So I needed something, the same thing with love. How do you explain the meaning of life in terms of love? And we don't even know what love is. Love has so many forms and manifestations. Love is, of course, important, and happiness is part of the story, but they're not the crucial parts of the story. I use something that could be called 4 components or 4 pillars of meaning that you could see, those of you who read the introduction to my book. And I call them merit, luck, gratitude, and inspiration. And we can use this example of people landing on the moon to explain at least the first 2 fairly easily. Neil Armstrong was one of several hundred astronauts that were training in Houston for this mission or for similar mission. And obviously he must have had fantastic physical health, sharp mind, courage, many other characteristics that selected him to be one of those even considered for a mission like that. In other words, he had to have some merit. He had to earn that privilege of flying to the moon. It was not something that was given to him. It was not a question of lottery. It was something that he worked for at least 10 or 15 years of his life to put himself in a position to do that. Obviously, some matter of luck was needed too, for this and for anything else in life. Luck is always present, good luck or bad luck. Think about it this way. This crew that went to the moon, the crew that flew with Apollo 11, practiced together for 18 months to do it. You may wonder what could have happened, or what would have happened if one of these crew members got sick a few days before the launching. In that case, that member would not be replaced by another member, but the new crew, the whole crew would have been replaced by another crew. There were several crews that were practicing. There was crew number 1 and crew number 2, and then there were crews number 3 and 4. They were all practicing, and it was a matter of luck for this crew that we know that actually went to the moon, that none of them got sick, that none of them had any issues that would have prevented them in the last minute after practicing and preparing it for so long. And you can also say that crew number 2 had a bad luck, that nobody got sick in crew number 1, and they were not those to make history. Because whoever remembers crew number 2 and crew number 3 and crew number 4, and yet we have a reason to believe that they worked just as hard, that they practiced just as hard, that they were just as focused as the members of crew number 1 and crew number 2. But they just didn't have enough luck. They had merit for sure. But maybe fortune, the goddess fortune, was not on their side. In my book, and already in the introduction, I mentioned that things like merit and luck are the external characteristics of life, the external features of life. But that I actually want to put more emphasis, and that I, as a matter of fact, believe that more important are what I call the internal elements that constitute or that contribute to the meaning of life. These internal elements are even less clear and more obscure than the external one. We can fairly clearly identify what merit is and what luck is. But when it comes to the internal characteristics, there's a whole spectrum of concept, a whole spectrum of ideas that could have been used. So I had to select a few, and I was very careful and spent a lot of time thinking about what are those that I want, what are those that I need, what are those that could actually clarify what I have in mind. I'm going to give you one example that I did not use in a book, but that can help for the purpose of this presentation, explain to you some of the things I had in mind. These internal features, let me just say that, is something that all spiritual traditions, whether they are religious or not strictly religious, that's what these spiritual traditions focus far more on than what we do in our normal life, in practical life. So I looked at the spiritual traditions of some kind or another, and I want to point out one symbol that is so important for understanding what life is about. Again, that symbol has no name and has different manifestations, not one unique name. Most of us in the US culture and the European or Western cultures would recognize it as the Star of David. We would associate it with the Jewish religion. It's a symbol that consists of two triangles, identical triangles that are overlapping, but one is pointing up and the other triangle is pointing down. Let me just say that this symbol precedes the Jewish religion for at least 5,000 years. It's been known for almost as long as there's any recorded human history. For instance, in India, it's known as yantra, Y-A-N-T-R-A, and it's understood to be a connection of combination of Shiva and Shakti, the male and female energy. A similar sign is what's known as the yin and the yang in the Chinese, Taoist, and Confucian traditions. Also in India, in the system of chakras, in a system of energy of 7 chakras, it is analogous or corresponding to the 5th chakra, to the 4th chakra, the middle one, the chakra of the heart, the energy of the heart, where the physical energy and the spiritual energy meet together and partially overlap. Now, I want you to think about these two triangles for a while. One is pointing up, the other is pointing down. The one that's pointing up is called or understood in terms of aspiration. This is what we aspire toward. If you recall that idea of life being a journey, life being a voyage, life being a pilgrimage, this is what leads us forward. This is what points to us in which direction to go. But for a while, I want to concentrate a little bit more on this other triangle that's pointing down, because that's the one we think about more often. In literature, it is sometimes called inertia, the triangle of inertia, something that doesn't want us to move anywhere, doesn't want us to go on any journey, that wants us to stay where we are, especially if you're comfortable with where we are. This triangle is also used, this triangle pointing down is also used as a symbol of an obstacle. There's some kind of obstacle on our way that's preventing us either to continue our journey or that's preventing us to continue that journey in a straight line. So we have to overcome that obstacle, go around it, remove it. And it's interesting that I got one of the questions from the students that's actually helping me to explain to you what I have in mind here. You see, there is no life without obstacles. Life is a struggle. And sometimes there are too many obstacles. And it's precisely those times when we are asking the question of the meaning of life and when we think about the meaning of life. And one normal reaction to those obstacles, and they can be of different kind: financial, health issues, lack of success, being heartbroken, being betrayed by a friend. There could be obstacles of all kinds that happen in life. These obstacles can overwhelm us. That's why it's called the inertia, to kind of be put and give up on any hopes, give up on any ambition, not try to change things, become depressed, becomes anxious about life, and so on and so forth. But the problem with the meaning of life is precisely that we have to find a way around that obstacle, that we, or to express it far more precisely, that we have to find a way to turn an obstacle into an opportunity. This is one of the most difficult and most important insights with regard to the meaning of life. A life becomes meaningful when we are capable to turn obstacles into opportunities. Let me give you one example, since I'm a professor and even Austin is a student, and most of you are. You write a paper, you work on it a lot, you want a good grade, and you show your professor a draft of the paper, and your professor just tears it apart or give you so many negative comments and critical comments, and you realize if you submit this paper, it's going to be a C paper, B minus, and you're hoping for a B plus or more. Obviously, if you work hard and if you thought that the paper is good, you're not going to like the comments of the professor. Of course, you can blame the professor and curse the professor and curse the paper and the day when you enrolled in that class. But to explain to you this idea of turning an obstacle into an opportunity, when you overcome that initial negative reaction for seeing your paper being all marked in red with negative comments, with critical comments, right? Nobody likes that. Nobody feels good about that. But when you calm down a little bit and stop cursing your professor and you actually read the professor's comments, if you're smart enough, you can realize that what a professor is trying to do is actually help you write a better paper. That's why these comments are there. Yes, that means extra work because you thought you were done with this paper and just wanted to make sure that you wrote a good paper so you can move on and prepare for your econ midterm or something else. And now the professor is basically forcing you to spend an additional 5 hours or 10 hours working on this paper. But you know what? If you do spend those 5 hours or 10 hours working on your paper, almost certainly that paper is going to be much better one than you thought was a good paper, than you thought was a finished paper. You see how it works? And almost everything in life works like that. There's an obstacle that we don't like that can make us depressed or moody or disappointed. And yet, if you turn around, if you look at it from another perspective, you realize that that obstacle actually is a door of opportunity to do something else, to improve yourself, to improve your paper, to make your own life richer, to increase the quality, the standard of the expectations, and so on. This is what I was trying to capture in terms of gratitude. I'm not going to explain this term too much. We don't have that much time. I don't want to be talking and the time's flying. But I want to say a little bit about that other obstacle, that other triangle that I called aspiration, or which in a book I called inspiration. Notice that both these words, aspiration and inspiration, have contained the root word spirit. This is something that's spiritual. This is something that inspires you. This is something about what you're dreaming about. This is something about what you want to become. I'll tell you a little secret and you can laugh at me. When I was 9 years old and these astronauts were on the moon, I would secretly sneak out and try to see if I can somehow see them with my naked eyes. I couldn't, but I cursed the fact that I was born 10 years late or 20 years late, or that I don't get the opportunity to be the one who's going on the moon. But I knew that I have to do something like that. I have to find my own moon. I have to climb up to my own moon. You see, that's something that was driving me when I got a little bit older and more mature. I realized that what it means is to try to be focused on what are the good things that human beings can do for each other, or even more specifically in my case, to study, to learn about, and then try to emulate what are the best things that human beings are capable. Okay, we're taking a complete reversal from that initial negative reaction to an obstacle that we are facing. We want to turn around and see what can we do with our lives, considering who we are, where we live, what our individual gifts are, and what good we can do for the well-being of the entire community, so that our little step is indeed a small step for one human being, yourself, but it may be a leap, if not as big as the one that Neil Armstrong made for the entire humanity. This is what the meaning of life is about. And many of you are surprised in your questions and your comments that I'm willing to distinguish or to claim that some lives make more meaning than others, that some lives are more meaningful than the other. Maybe it looks elitist to you because we put so much emphasis on everybody being treated as equal. Everybody being treated as equal is fine, but what that really means that is everybody should have equal opportunities, not that we are all equal. We are all different, but we should all have equal opportunities. That's a point for those of you who study philosophy that Plato already made in Book 5 of the Republic. I did not go to the moon, but I crossed the ocean to come to the United States and become a doctor of philosophy and get an opportunity to teach at the wonderful College of the Holy Cross and have students like Austin Keefe and many of you, I hope, who are there in the audience listening, who I cannot see right now. It's been 30 years of a great journey of learning about the Catholic tradition, the Holy Cross and Jesuit tradition that Holy Cross represents, and bringing to that tradition something that I am, something that's my native tradition, and something that's a cosmopolitan outlook to this whole tradition, so that we can think about how can we devote our lives to improving small things for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of all human beings together. I will now address in a few minutes some of your concerns and some of your questions, and then we can open the floor for your questions and for discussion maybe. And as part of answering some of your questions as to why I turned to Plato and Mencius, some of you ask me, who lived more than 2,000 years ago, when our knowledge has been increasing and we live in modern times, why look back to somebody who didn't know any of our technology and science and something like that? What can they teach us about the meaning of life? Right? So some of you ask me that question. And I want to answer this question first indirectly by making first a distinction between a question and a problem. A question and a problem. A question is something that is addressed to the mind. A question is something that's an intellectual query. And by a problem, I understand something that is addressed to the entire human being, that is addressed to the entire life, to all that we are. We ask a question when there's not enough knowledge about a certain thing and we want to be better informed, we want to learn more. We have a problem usually when we have too much knowledge and we can't sort out what is right and what is wrong and how to understand it. About the meaning of life, we don't have a shortage of knowledge. We have too much knowledge. We have too many ideas. And yet we cannot sort out how to live and what's the right way to live and what is not the right way to live. And about such things as the meaning of life, some of these thinkers of the old times lived in more naive times and more innocent times and had far less technical knowledge than we do today. But they were closer to the heart of the problem. They were understanding things better. They were closer to the essence of things than we are. Our minds are too distracted with too many things that people have discovered in the meanwhile. It's difficult for us to think in very simple terms and come back to the heart of the issue. And one of the things that I'm trying to show in my book, that the meaning of question, the meaning of life, is the problem of the heart most of all. It is not an intellectual problem. It's the problem of finding the right aspiration in your life or inspiration and finding enough courage to overcome the fear of failure, to overcome the obstacles and pursue your path. After I finished my book, I found a beautiful quote that's ascribed to Bob Marley, but I'm sure that I've seen it before and that somebody else has used it before Bob Marley. You know who Bob Marley is, I assume. Bob Marley had two sentences that I think summarize my book and what I was trying to talk to you right now. Bob Marley says the following thing: love the life you live and live the life you love. That's what he said. Listen to it one more time. Love the life you live. Live the life you love. The first sentence, or the first part of it, deals with gratitude. No matter what life throws at you, no matter what kind of obstacles you may face, find a way to appreciate what you have. Find a way to show gratitude to what you've been given, because we are always given something. And the second part, live the life you love, deals with inspiration. Find your dream and follow it. Or some of my students would know it in terms of a phrase that was made popular by Joseph Campbell: find your bliss and follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. This is what will give you that's what will take you on a journey of a meaningful life. Okay. I want to say a few more words about happiness. Interestingly enough, in the last 40 years, a lot of psychological research has been dedicated to happiness, to the problem of happiness. It seems that in the 20th century, for the most part of the 20th century, psychology and psychiatry were so much focused on negative, on neurosis, psychosis, and these things, that toward the end of the century, psychologists themselves got tired of negativity and trying traumas and just dealing with the things that create problems for people, and that they decided to focus on positive psychology, not on what's the worst thing we experience in our childhood, but what's the best thing that we experience in our childhood. And I just told you about one of the best things that I experienced in my childhood. I was 9 years old when people landed on the moon, and I thought, it's amazing what happened. It opened my dreams all the way to the sky. Sky is the limit, as they say. There are so many studies about happiness. There are more than 10,000 studies published every year in the last 20 years. You can imagine. That's an abused and overused students. And we are getting to know less and less about happiness as a result of these studies instead of more and more. But a few things that emerge from these studies are that we have, what's the right word, an exaggerated opinion about the value and significance of happiness. That happiness is mostly subjective, that happiness is mostly something that we associate with receiving, which fits very well with our consumerist society. What we can buy, what we can consume. Well, meaning of life is something that is long-term rather than short-term. And it's also something that's focused more on giving rather than on receiving. It's not what I can get from another person, but what I can give to people I care about, what I can do following the people who inspire me. How can I become That may be a slightly different point. The point where I believe that happiness and the meaning of life merge together is the original meaning of the word eudaimonia, that we translate as happiness when we read Aristotle and later. But this word for the Greeks did not mean what we meant by happiness. What it meant for them was flourishing. Flourishing. To be happy is to flourish. To be happy is to be able to live your life in a way that would lead to full development of your capacities, of your gifts. This is what happiness is. Happiness is not feeling good and having fun, far from it. I will just say one more thing about it, and then I will stop and see if we have questions from you. I believe that happiness and love are related to meaning, but not in a way that we anticipate them. We want to put everything that's good under the umbrella of happiness. And I'll just quote to finish to conclude the talk about happiness, the word of one philosopher who recently died, Nozick, a Harvard professor, Robert Nozick, who said, "There's much more to life than happiness. There's much more to life than happiness." And he was talking about the meaning of life. Happiness is not all there is. Happiness is feeling good about things. But life, taken more seriously, is about far many more things than just happiness. As for love, there's no meaningful life without love. But what I was trying to show in my book is that we have as many misconceptions about love as we do about happiness, if not more. And I'll just point out something that's crucial for me without going into all the details. We normally think of love in terms of a noun, or to translate it into practical language, into an object of love, who will love us and who we are going to love. Then there's love as a verb that's more important than love as a noun, and that is to love. What does it mean to love? And how can I show my love to the people I care about, to the persons that are fundamentally important to me? What I do in the book is to discuss love as an adverb, lovingly. How can we do things lovingly? That seemed to me to be the key to life, to the meaningful life. Key to the meaningful life is to approach the world, approach the people that we deal with in a loving way. Whoever they are, whatever they require of us, however much we can help them or not help them. I think that, to me, is the moon that we have to climb up to, the moon that I aspire to climb up to myself. The key to the meaning of life is how to become as loving person as possible. I will stop here now and thank you for your attention, and we'll turn it to Austin to see if we have some questions and if we can get the audience involved too. So.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that presentation. We'll turn to question and answers now. If you have a question, I request that you type it in the question and answer box, which you should find at the bottom of your screen. And we will try to get through as many questions as possible as we move forward before this presentation ends at 3:15. So one question's been sitting in the question and answer box for a little bit, and so I'll deal with that one first. So Jacob Milan asks the question about the meaning of life and the idea of life as a journey. I think it has to do with aspiration and inspiration as well. He writes, if life is a journey, one in which an individual travels throughout life with various experiences and hardships, do you believe that meaning is more dynamic than rigid? Also, is meaning dynamic in the sense where one can find more meaning at one point in this journey as compared to another part of the journey where meaning can be lacking.
Thank you, Jake. Good to know that you're there. Yes, you're right. The meaning of life is something that's dynamic. It's not something you can possess. It's almost something you participate in, or you don't participate in, or you exclude yourself from participating in by becoming rigid, becoming hard, and becoming unable to face new obstacles and turn them into new opportunities. So this is something that requires constant attention. The meaning of life is a very precious, fragile plant, so to say, and it requires constant care, enough sunshine and water and love, the loving hands that will take care of it. And despite all of these, there's never a guarantee that it may not slip away, that there may be not too much sunshine or too much water or something else that can kill the plant. It is a very difficult, tricky thing. It's like anything that involves love. Too much of anything can destroy it or kill it. So maybe I should connect it with these two triangles. Notice that in the Star of David, these two triangles are of the same size. The one triangle that's pointing up and the triangle that's pointing down. That's important because there are two fundamental conceptions, especially in the Western tradition with regard to life. One of them is captured in the concept of perfection, the other in the concept of, of balance or harmony. These two triangles, just as yin and yang, just as the chakra of the heart, point toward the key to the meaning of life being balance, being able to balance between aspirations and the problems we are facing, rather than perfection. This is something that we are misled to seek in our life, and this is why we so often get disappointed, because there is no perfection in this life. Sometimes we come close to it, but most of the time we are very, very far away from any perfection. So this is what I was trying to say in a book and do in a book. For instance, you have to balance the external factors and the internal factors. It's not enough to be a yogi and just think about the internal factors and forget about merit and forget about luck and forget about these things. How to balance. Balance may be another key to this approach to the meaning of life.
I have another question, but before I raise that question, I'd like to say that if anyone here has their hand up, please simply type your question in the chat, and then I'll be able to address it there. Since I don't personally know all of the attendees, it is better for people to ask their questions in the chat. Okay, so another attendee asks a question that I think also raises a second question. So this question essentially is, the attendee asks, does following your bliss or happiness guarantee a meaningful life? And I think this question raises another involving luck. Is there a sense in which one can say, do this or this set of things to guarantee oneself a meaningful life?
The answer is no. Nothing guarantees the meaning of life. Nothing in life is guaranteed. Life is a continuous struggle. It's an effort to improve yourself, to deal with the obstacles the best way you can, to come up with new sources of inspiration, to find more strength to deal with the obstacles. There's no guarantee. Think about, this is partially clarified by this moment of luck. Think about, most of your first-year students, I assume, in the audience, think about the big plans that you had for your prom or your high school graduation, and then the COVID pandemic happened and it just threw everything away. Think about your plans for going to college and the expectations. You earned the right to have a great prom. You earned the right to have a great first semester in college. And then you were forced to, most of you, at least the Holy Cross students, were to stay at home and take one Zoom class after another Zoom class. Nothing in life is guaranteed. There's no such thing as guarantee in life. Just when you think that you have something, it slips away. And it's better to live with caution, and it's better to live with this sense of being prepared to lose everything that you have, and to start climbing up again, and to start thinking about what else can I do? And I think our next question may lead us a little bit more in that direction as well. Austin?
Okay. Are you able to see the questions?
Yes, I'm able to see the question. Do you want me to read the question?
If you would like to read the next one, since it seems you have already begun to segue towards this, then I think that would be great.
I'm not going to answer Aldona's question because there is no place yet to pre-order, but I would let you know, Aldona. I have a question in front of me that's posed by Savannah. Says, what would you say to someone who's looking for the best way to walk with courage and with inspiration when they struggle with feeling the opposite very often? It's a beautiful question, Savannah. This is what we are really talking about. Let me try to give you an answer in slightly different terms that I did not use so far. This triangle pointing down, the obstacles that we are facing, the history, the experience of obstacles that we have been facing, that we have not been able to overcome, create in every single one of us a sense of fear. We have fear of dying, fear of failure of any kind, professional, personal failure. There is no way to get rid of that fear. And you said, how can we find courage? And maybe what is courage when there's so much fear? That's one way to translate your question. I want to tell you this. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means that something else is more important to you than fear. Okay? Think about it for a second. Something else is more important. Okay? There's always a chance of losing. There's always a fear of losing. But if something really matters to you, you try to reach that person again and again. A friend who doesn't want to respond, a lover who doesn't want to see you anymore. If that person really means something to you, you overcome that fear of another rejection or no answer by calling again, by texting again, by trying to see the person. That's what life is about. Finding that courage to try again and fail again if necessary, right? Fail to reach the moon, fail to reach the heart of another person, fail to get the grade that you want, at least right now. But maybe be able to fail it 6 months later, 2 years later, maybe be able to find a way to reach that destination when it really matters to you. Let me also use this opportunity to go back to this idea of a journey for a few seconds. In order for life to be meaningful, our life journey has to be successful. And there are really two good ways, and only two good ways to understand the success of the life journey. One of them, or both of them, are presented to us in terms of the idea of home. This is what inspiration is about, to build a sanctuary, to build a place where we feel at home. So a journey is successful and life is meaningful when either we are able to return to our home, or more often, and I think more properly, when we are able to build and establish and maintain our own home. And by home, I don't really mean a building. It's not necessarily a house. A house is a physical object. You can have a house that's not a home, but the home can be not just a place, but the company of someone you love, a company of a person you fully trust, a company of a person with whom you're completely open, with whom you yourself. So we have to find the courage, however many times we may fail, to reach home, to find that destination. That's what makes life meaningful. I think we have more questions. Keith, why don't you, Austin, why don't you pick anyone you want?
Okay, so I've had the chance to read Isaac's. So let's go with his, and then we'll
Read
get to
it
the
aloud.
next ones. So Isaac asks, it seems intuitive to say that flourishing would make one happy, that when one overcomes obstacles, turns them into opportunities, achieves merit, becomes inspired, etc., that all of these things make one happy. And in fact, if they don't make us happy, wouldn't it make more sense to pursue something else? What is the distinction between flourishing and happiness? And why ought we prefer flourishing over happiness if they're different?
Okay. Wow, that's a tough question. Complex. It's a very complex question. You see, one of the differences between happiness and meaning is that in the case of happiness, there's this concept that we choose what to pursue and in order to be happy, right? That it's the happiness depends very much on our choice. There's always that element of luck, but let's ignore it for a while. You see, with meaning, with flourishing, it's only partially true. Flourishing is between choosing and being chosen, so to say. Let me use an idea, Isaac. I assume that you're a student there and that you read my introduction. And in this introduction, I pointed out this idea of Plato, that our souls consist of three parts. And I mentioned something that's very important, that for Plato, and I think in general, that we neglect. Plato believed that in each one of us, one of the parts is more developed, or that we're more gifted with respect, let's say, to the mind, or with respect to the heart, or with respect to bodily functions and so on. That's something you do not choose. That's something you're born with. That's something that you have a gift from God or a gift of Mother Nature, or however you want to understand it. We live in a society that's too individualistic and too voluntaristic, that makes us believe, if I want to be a doctor, who's going to stop me if I work hard? I want to be a doctor regardless of how many gifts I have for being a doctor or not. Or I want to be a banker, or I want to be this, or I want to be that. But that's not how it works. And that may lead to happiness, but not to meaning. To pursue the meaning is to pursue the gifts you've been given. That's not your choice. What your bliss is not something you choose. What you choose is to recognize it or not, and to follow it or not. That's a different. So the meaning of life, at least the idea as I understand it, as I want to pursue it, is that you understand what your gifts are, and you show the gratitude for the gifts you're given, and you're pursuing those gifts rather than to think, but I want to be a doctor because a doctor makes more money than a guitar player, than a musician, than a philosopher. Think about being a stupid philosopher, right? How much money are you making? Nothing. Well, you can't even get the job. How can you make money? But if you're a banker, an econ major, you can make a lot of money. But is your heart there? Is your heart in money making? Would you be able to wake up every morning for 35 years of your life and be excited about going to work if your heart is not there? Would you be able to do it over and over and over again? I've seen it with my mother. I've seen it with my parents, especially. what it means to love what you're doing, what it means to wake up and be excited to go back to your work over and over and over again. This is what it's about. That's what flourishing is about. Developing what you have, not trying to become what you're not made to be. Not trying to mold yourself in accordance with what's the highest paid job in society or most appreciated in society. That's the difference. That's a big difference. Austin.
I think we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. So I'll ask this question from Toy Nguyen, who asks a very pressing question. What happens if someone has no luck whatsoever? Can they still gain meaning by putting in more hard work and substitute for the lack of luck? Can one always substitute merit for luck?
Okay. I don't believe there is a person who has no luck whatsoever. I don't believe that it's all that one-sided, Lily. I know who asked the question, right? Look, this is again that recognition of who you are and what your gifts are. If somebody's not born beautiful, he's born with the ability to run fast. If somebody's not born very smart, he can be born with a big heart and be the best friend somebody can have and the most loyal friend you have. This is the beauty of life. And this is what makes it possible for everyone to pursue the meaning of life and to flourish with the gifts that you've been given. Usually when we say somebody has a bad luck with respect to the things that society appreciates highly, and we happen to have a bad luck in not being beautiful enough or sexy enough or smart enough or wealthy enough or all other things but everybody has a gift. The beauty of life is that we all have some gifts and that we have to accept what we have as God-given. I have 3 daughters and they are all so different. One is academically inclined. The middle one is not academically inclined at all. She doesn't care about books, but I think she's maybe the best person I ever met in my life. She has such a big heart for everybody. But she doesn't care about books and she doesn't care about intellectual things. So the problem is to find something that you're given, that's yours. That is luck. That's the best luck you can dream about, that you have something that other people don't or not to the same degree, and to be able to live up with your gifts rather than to spend your life dreaming about the things that your neighbors or friends or classmates have and feel down rather than to and of course then you cannot feel any sense of gratitude, and then you cannot feel any inspiration in life. Okay, I'm ready for the last question, Austin, if we have time.
Okay, I have a question from David Gray. It may not be the shortest question, so I'll try and I'll focus on one part of it.
Okay.
It's about the nature of obstacles. So David's focusing on the example that you gave about learning from a professor's criticism on a paper. And notice that this type of way of thinking about this example seems to say that we should transform ourselves according to the nature of the obstacles we encounter, or in a sense that maybe we don't simply shape who we are, but the obstacles that we encounter play a role in shaping who we are. So David adds, sometimes we say something a little different. We say, turn obstacles into opportunities, and we take this to mean that we should kind of pivot away from them or overcome them in a way that maybe doesn't show that the obstacles are actually shaping who we are, but move beyond them simply. Do you think that this is an important distinction in thinking about obstacles? And he asks, do you have further thoughts about the nature of obstacles?
David, I'll be honest with you. There are many times when I thought that the obstacles are annoying. I don't know how to deal with them. and many other things, and I did not welcome them or cherish them. For instance, I write a book. I spend so much time and energy on writing the book, and I'm looking forward to see what reviewers are going to say. And then I have a reviewer that probably didn't read half of the book and just trashes the whole thing. How do I turn this into an opportunity when this guy has ruined my book? And his review may be read more than somebody can go on Amazon.com and post such a bad review of your book. What do you do about it? Sometimes, sometimes you cannot do anything directly. Sometimes you can do something indirectly. Let me give you one example. I cannot change somebody's bad review. If somebody thinks that my book is bad, and I believe that it's not, and some other people reassure me who have fairly objective judgment, there's nothing I can do to remove that bad review. It's there, it's posted, it's published. But the two things there's at least one thing I can do. I have to start wondering, is this review the reflection of my book, or this person's struggle with his own life or her own life? Okay. And I don't know who this person is often, whether this person is jealous, or this person is stupid, or this person is mean, but I can look at myself and I can say, do I sometimes react like this when my colleagues publish books, or when other people publish books that I would like to write, but am not able to, or have not succeeded in doing something like that? Do I not sometimes behave like that myself? Jealousy, envy, those are normal human feelings. Lack of listening, lack of attention, not paying. We're obsessed with our own things. So my wife comes home and she's pissed off, and I'm tired, and it creates all kinds of troubles. You cannot maybe remove that one obstacle like the book review, and it's really not good and useful, but it can help you understand that you can be just like that person, and that perhaps in many other situations you can be like that person, and you can do something for your life by stopping your own negative reaction when you're tired and pissed off, and you think something's bad, and you want to trash somebody else's book or somebody's paper, and say, wait, maybe my judgment is too rushed. Maybe my judgment is too harsh. Maybe that person put a lot of work into that, and I'm not trying hard enough to understand what that work is about. Let me give it a second chance. Let me give it the benefit of doubt. And I think if we can do that, you don't remove that obstacle, but we all become more sensitive. We all become aware of how many obstacles we create for each other unnecessarily, the obstacles that detract us from following our bliss and for focusing on what really matters. I hope that can answer that question, and I hope that that's not a cop-out, but the real benefit in all of that. Learn something from an obstacle. Find a way to make yourself better. If not by directly addressing that obstacle, by looking at yourself in a mirror and trying to find a way that you yourself become a better person who would never repeat that kind of obstacle, put that kind of obstacle in front of other people.
Thank you so much, Professor Cicovacki, for this talk. I'd like to offer you my thanks on behalf of the Center for Ethics Student Forum and the John Beer Blumenfeld Center for Ethics. And thank you to everyone who asked a question and who attended. It was great listening to Professor Cicovacki's responses to your questions. And if you would like to find a recording of this video, then you can go to ethics.gsu.edu and click on the news and events section of that page, where after some time you'll find a listed thing of this event and a link to the video of it. Okay, this concludes Professor Cicovacki's presentation on the meaning of life. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.